Thank you for joining us on another episode of Popcorn for Breakfast, our movie review episode, with your co-host, Kirk.
Hello, everyone.
I am your other co-host, Cam. Thought you were going to say top of the morning, Kirk.
Oh, yes, I came off a little British right there, didn't I?
You did. I was like, wait. Calibrate.
Rewind. Top of the morning to you. Good to see you, Cam.
There it is. There's the Irish. Well, as you may have noticed from Kirk's accent and his hair color and eye color, we are reviewing an Irish film, a film that takes place in Northern Ireland, a film that was directed by an Irish director, well-renowned stage actor, play actor, screenwriter, director, Kenneth Branagh. And that film is Belfast. It's available to stream if you're willing to shell out $19.99. It got a limited release in theaters, did the whole indie circuit, and has been a bit of a difficult one to get our paws around, but we were able to check it out. It is being very buzzy, very, very buzzy. With regard to the Oscars, award shows, it's getting lots of buzz and good critical acclaim and press. Well, so we had to get our eyes on it, Kirk, right?
We absolutely did. Look at that picture. If you're watching on YouTube's, if you're not, just Google any kind of promotional for this film. I mean, it's beautiful. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice aesthetically, very, very creative, artistic approach to it. I'm sure we'll talk about it in our review. But Kirk, it's actually very fitting that you are the one who's up for Synopsis this week for a director I know you're very fond of, Kenneth Branagh, and a film that takes place where your homeland, though
right.
you were born and raised in America, you have Irish heritage. So Kirk, tell us about Belfast.
Right. Before we do, I'd like to talk about my heritage. Thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned that. We're going to go back to the 1800s, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Strap in.
This all is going to be a long
one. I have spent countless hours with my grandfather in front of listening to Ancestry.com, and I have got, a banger for you. This is pretty exciting for me. I've always been a fan of Kenneth Branagh. Before I realized how much Irish is in me, I really should one day find out the percentage. I think that'd be really cool because I self-identify as a full Irish person, though I'm surely not, even though my red beard and my blonde hair is a pretty cool feature. I think that one day my goal is to also be Kenneth Branagh, like a younger version of him, because I feel like we have a lot of similar characteristics. I am very much in love with anything he puts out. He's the director of Thor. He was in Hamlet, directed Hamlet, his version of it, and countless other films. Much Ado About Nothing. He's been in countless other productions that you haven't seen. 12th Night. It just goes on and on again. So this account, the synopsis of Belfast, happens in Ireland. Let me read what I wrote down for you. A young boy living in Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland, in the 1960s, experiences firsthand the conflicts of the world and how those disputes can shape, grow, and sometimes hurt the ones we hold closest to our hearts. And that is the core of this movie. It's about family. It's about struggle. It's about overcoming. It's about identity, where you claim your flag of your homeland, and are you willing to move on when it's not safe for you, or it's not something that is it's going to be a part of you always, but it's not something that can continue to be a part of you right now. And we're going to get deep into all the crazy stuff that was happening in Ireland from the 1960s all the way up into the 90s, which is nuts.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I was in high school, I don't know if everybody had to do this. We had to do it. There was an essay called the Peace Essay in high school where you had to write about a conflict or two conflicts or something like that and compare them and talk about, how we can learn from these conflicts and move on and things like that. And I picked the Civil War in Northern Ireland between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland. Civil War that, as you said, Kirk, raged on for 30 years and is sort of the catalyst for all things in this film. Everything sort of revolves around it. It almost reminds me of that musical, The Band's Visit, where there's this one triggering event that happens, but then there's all these different side stories and narratives going on. And so it becomes less about that event, even though the event has its, roots and all of that, but it's more about all these tiny little relationships and pieces unfolding around it. This movie's sort of like that. But yeah, it's a very interesting conflict. But yeah, this movie, it's not a straight line narrative, right, Kirk? I mean, it's a story about the ties that bind us, our faith, our family, our home, our all of these things that are so universal to the human experience. And it's a very interesting movie, and we'll get into whether or not it's buzzworthy. It's getting lots of buzz. Does it deserve it? Kirk, let's start with those acting performances. We do 2 acting superlatives. The first one is for the best overall actor in the film. That one's called The Oscar Goes To. The second one is called Scene Stealer, for the person who was sort of a surprise or supporting role that came in and stole the show. But Kirk, first, let's start with the Oscar. Who are you giving your Oscar to this week?
This one, no-brainer. Catriona Balfe. You have seen her in, most notably, the Outlander series, and which I forget where it's streaming on right now, but it's very available. I've not watched it myself, but big acclaim for that whole series. So Catriona Balfe plays Ma, which is effectively, as this is Kenneth Branagh's semi-autobiographical account of his time in Belfast, his mother. And wow, does she go through a lot. 1960s, very much so, in any part of the world, was so patriarchal. And in this particular case, the father is away at work most of the time. So Ma is raising her 2 boys and still abides by the rules of men. And what you find in this is that she is shaping these men to be men, these boys, to be able to live their lives as boys and start growing gradually, but also be mindful of their mother. And she just balances this so well, all the while she is the heartbeat of this family. She is still guiding conversations and asking to break away from these norms that are developed within the Irish culture, which is very not stoic, but very, this is the way that it is, and this is how I'm going to be. She just cuts right through that, because she says, no, there's more for us. And yes, we've been born in Belfast, we've raised ourselves in Belfast, but it's time to move on from Belfast. Look around. And she is she's not the catalyst, but she's the catalyst within the family to say, no, we're not going to do this anymore, which causes a lot of conflict from these homelanders who say, no, this is where we stay. This is an island. This is where our home is. We must stay here. We must support the community. I can go 3 doors down and I know every single person in that house. I can go 6 doors down and I know who lived there for the past 45 years. She is such a fantastic character, and you can see that Kenneth Branagh really wrote her with such love for her and for what she had to go through as the mother to hold this family together through these rising conflicts of Protestants versus Catholics. So bravo, Catriona Balfe, you're an incredible actress. I'm ashamed that I haven't seen you in more. I've only seen you in a few things, and top of my list, this performance in recent memory.
Yeah, Catriona Balfe, around this time, must have been 2019, we were reviewing Ford versus Ferrari, and she appeared in that film and got our scene stealer for her performance. Both of us actually gave awesome. Catriona Balfe our scene stealer for her performance in that movie, which is very, pretty small in terms of dialogue, but really impactful. This role was not small in dialogue, but she also got my pick in a cast that's been really lauded for great performances, and there were many to choose from. Catriona Balfe steals the show and was the best overall actor. There's one scene in particular for me that really sealed it, and it's when she's talking to her husband about whether or not they can leave Belfast. And she's, she sees the logic behind leaving. She sees the violence that's happening. She sees the fact that her husband's always gone. And with the violence that's going on, it's better to have the family together and, safe and things like that. But she can't pull the trigger on leaving her home. And as she's talking about it, you can tell that she is grasping at justifications for her argument because she just wants to be home. And there really is no other reason, that she just wants to be home. So she's pulling out reasons that sound logical, but she's scraping the bottom of the barrel, and she's realizing, like, it doesn't have to be logical. It's my home. It's my home. She never says anything like that, but you can feel it because her performance is so powerful, and she was so in touch with her character. She was able to deliver that message non-verbally and with her emotional performance, and with the way that she was able to deliver those lines. It was clear what she was trying to say without expressly stating it. And there were so many other great scenes, but that was her Oscar moment. It really was. It was the scene that they show if you're nominated, the big scene where she's talking to Jamie Dornan, who plays her husband. And I was just blown away. It was breathtaking. And then again, whenever she tells her family after the sort of the climax, the riot scene where, her son, played by Judah Hill, is basically held at gunpoint. They're being threatened with their lives, and they get out of it. And she says, Aunt and Uncle are coming, and then we're packing up. We're going. And she can't believe that she's hearing herself say it, but she knows that it's the only thing to say. Powerful stuff. And it's stuff that everyone can relate to, and that's what makes it so powerful. But the realism, the authenticity that she breathes into the performance is what makes it such a human leveling type experience, and why she did a really incredible job. I think she's going to continue to get lots of work in this industry. To your point, Kirk, we haven't seen her in much yet, but the credits are going to start racking up here soon because her resume is impressive. And this is another feather in her cap, and could earn her a real Oscar nomination, not just one of our Oscar nominations here on this podcast.
We're manifesting it right
That's
now.
right.
This is it. We started small with Scene Stealer. She's got the Oscar from our books now, and tomorrow morning she's going to get the nomination.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Kirk. Let's talk about Scene Stealer. Let's talk about the rest of these cast members. And if there was one person who stood out with a surprising or, just a real popping performance, something that popped off the screen for you, what do you got?
I said it just a moment ago, is that you can tell from all this writing that, again, Kenneth Branagh wrote this whole screenplay as well, that we have, just absolute love pouring out for Mom and what she had to go through and her decisions that made the finally, yep, pack your bags, we leave, let's go. There's an admiration for Dad and for Pop, but man, the love of an Irishman for the maternal sense in his life is so palpable. And my Scene Stealer has to go to Judi Dench. Dame Judi Dench plays Granny, and they do this incredible thing, and by they I mean Kenneth Branagh does this incredible thing where there are all these windows strategically placed for the mise-en-scène of this story, in the fact that people are standing in front of windows. They're either in it or outside of it. They're either listening or being heard, or they're either being listened to or not being heard. And so often we have Judi Dench as the granny, as this just this well of wisdom, because she's lived there forever. She has the most knowledge, seemingly, even though she's going through a brand new tumultuous time with the family. She has this grounding to her, that she is just taking in all the information while everyone is discussing and while everyone else is learning. Honestly, maybe she's been through something similar, or she's ready to provide that wisdom. And then, of course, she is ready to talk. she'll throw her head inside the window. She'll keep on. I think she's either knitting or crocheting or eating at any given moment, and she'll just start talking. She's like, "Well, this is the way it is, and you shouldn't do that, but you should do this," and just absolutely stunning in so many ways that we just watch her listen, watch her carefully respond with no words at times. Specifically, they're going, Buddy, the main character, the boy, aka Kenneth Branagh, as a child, is going with Granny, taking her to the movies, and he's asking her about the different types of things that she wants to be, and riding on a flying car and all these very fun, whimsical things. And I mean, she does some things that I didn't know were possible with your face, that are absolutely brilliant to see on screen. So Judi Dench, I'll talk about her all day. She gets my scene stealer today.
Well, Kirk, it's a good pick, and it must be ladies' night tonight on the podcast, because I'm going with Dame Judi Dench as well. I mean, one of the best to ever do it. That goes without saying. I mean, she's played so many iconic roles throughout her illustrious career. One of the most decorated actors that we have, and a true pro's pro. I mean, somebody who just really exemplifies what it means to be a performer and who understands all of the minutia of acting. I mean, she's always putting on a clinic anytime she's on the screen. And this was an interesting performance for her. I know that Kenneth Branagh and Judi Dench have worked together tons and tons of times, so she was sort of the no-brainer pick here. But, you know, she wasn't given a ton of time to shine. She didn't have that Oscar moment that we were talking about here. You know, she didn't have her big moment, her big monologue or anything like that. But her strength, Kirk, is really sort of what you talked about in her responses. Nonverbal, verbal. She's a lot of time the scene partner, in which the person who is having their moment is playing off of her, and she's just elevating it to the next level with her incredible performances. There are two scenes in particular where I think that this happens. The first is with her husband, and they're sort of reminiscing about the old days, and he's talking about, if the husband's talking about how, people look at me and they wonder if my heart's ever skipped a beat because I'm old. They don't remember that I'm young. And they're sort of sharing their love and affection for each other. And Judi Dench is doing this very real granny-like thing where she's, sort of pushing him down, like being like, oh, stop, don't be, like being bashful and kind of jabbing at him as old couples sort of do, just sort of giving each other a hard time. But also they're sharing this romantic moment, and she makes it clear in her performance that, for her character, like, this is the height of romantic conversation. She's like, this is great. He's gushing his love for me, even though we're two, old folks who've been together for a very long time, but there's still this very real love, and she just delivers it beautifully there. And then again, with her grandson, the scene you talked about, Kirk, where the young Kenneth Branagh buddy, he is talking to her about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and taking her to the movies and things like that. And as you said, the nonverbals are just off the charts. And then she's left as the final line of dialogue in the film is delivered by her, even though she never got her big moment to shine. She delivers this really stinging, piercing, human moment where it's like, oh man, she's watching her family leave. She knows that it has to happen, but now she knows she's going to die in Belfast alone without her family. And while she knows it's right, it hurts. It hurts so bad, and it hurts so good. And all of these, it's just such a complex and emotionally rich and human thing. And Judi Dench was just perfect delivering it. I was blown away. So she's my scene stealer, even though she really didn't get your prototypical moments to steal the show. She still managed to do it because she is one of the best ever.
She did. I think she actually is just Kenneth Branagh's mother. I mean, because how did she do that? How
yeah,
in the
it's
world?
Incredible. It is incredible work.
Let me break the rules here. I want to give an honorable mention, scene stealer, to Mr. Jude Hill, who plays Buddy.
Yes.
It was difficult to leave him out, but he's very young and he has lots of opportunity to win this with our very prestigious awards here on Popcorn for Breakfast, I think. Particularly the scene where they tell him that they're moving, and you have him crammed in between Ma and Pa, and he just starts crying immediately, like no hesitation. No, it was so authentic, and I was just completely blown away. Crying on cue is one of the most difficult things to do. And he nailed it. And so many other parts in this where you're just really just glued to him. So bravo to Mr. Jude Hill.
Yeah, it's a good call. First big movie performance for the young Jude Hill, and well, really well done. Really good work. All right, let's talk about the movie a little bit more and talk about some things outside of the acting performances that blew us away, or maybe some things that we had marks on. So let's start with the good news. Showstopper. Kirk, what was the thing that stuck out to you about this movie?
Man, there are so many options. I already talked about the windows and the mise en scène with the placement of those and the characters. The showstopper that I'm going with is that how the conflict of the Catholicism versus Christianity was so, it was taken care of so well where we were intrigued the entire film. I feel like that's a very easy thing to just say, it's happening in the background and we're really going to focus on this family. But the way it was interspliced with the narrative in a very intentional way, because it was real, very, very, a lot easier to do that upon years and years of reflection that Kenneth Branagh has had, and to make it its own weight in any given moment of the film. So it doesn't just disappear. It's always there. It's always lingering there. It's always this not a pressure cooker, because I'll talk about that later, but it's just always there, always present. And I think that was very well done in such a movie that is very much a character study, to be able to have it ultimately is a feel-good movie, even though your heart is ripped out of your chest a couple of times. So that, again, that through line with handling the troubles, as it's referred to, the Civil War over in Ireland, because of this religious fight, I think it was really, really extremely well done. It could only be done by someone from a native who was going through it.
Yeah, it's a good call. And it's a complex thing, I think, too. It's a, civil conflicts are very complicated in general, because typically what drives them are things that people can't help. Like, you're born into a Protestant family, you're born into a Catholic family, and now you're at war, right, with each other over these things that have happened. Or every civil conflict at its root really comes down to things that can't change, kind of. And that's why there's war. Like, if you look at like the American Civil War, obviously the issue of slavery, but most of the people who were slavers, at that time were born into generation and generation of slavers, and they were born in the South. So it became a South versus North thing. It's oftentimes these ties, again, the ties that bind us, that we don't have as much control over it. And obviously there are people who, in our Civil War, who were like, slavery is bad. Great. Good on them. But there were lots of people also in the South who were fighting that were not necessarily pro-slavery, but were just like pro the South or whatever.
Right.
These are complex issues. So to have this as the central story, and to know that there is just such a complex, deep, divide and so many details that are almost hard to comprehend. It's ambitious, but it also worked really well, to your point, Kirk. I think it really helped tie things together, and was sort of the perfect event to sort of gradually escalate the tension in the film, and to help show you why the mom is under so much stress, why the dad is under so much stress, how it looked from the kid's perspective. Like, it's all, it really helps to understand the family dynamics and relationship dynamics going on in the movie too. So I think that's a great call out. My scene stealer, my showstopper, is Kenneth Branagh's ability to preserve the childlike wonderment, the childlike, gaze, I guess, the way that a child sees and feels things. He was able to sort of perfectly freeze, like cryo freeze that feeling, and turn it into a film without any noticeable adult tweaking of that. A lot of times when you look back at things from when you were a kid, you're like, man, I remember my dad was like a superhero to me. And you go, well, that was just because I was a kid, or I remember this, that, or the other this way. But then you go, that was just because I was a kid. What Kenneth Branagh does is he takes this and truly tells it through the lens of a child. He truly tells it from that angle, literally that angle at times. Cameras looking up at, hero shots on the mom and the dad, because when you are a kid, your parents are superheroes, and even when you're an adult too. But you think they are like really superheroes when you are a kid. And the way that he used films, and how films are in black and white and sometimes in color because they're like this different world, or the stage show is in color because it was this different world, and that's how he remembers it. But the reason the movie's in black and white is because he has such a close tie to film, and that's why he's a director now. So when he looks back on his past, it's really like a movie. It's like an old movie to him, and that's the stylistic choice there. He does a really good job of tying that together, and he really doesn't. It's almost like he went through the creative process and didn't like fact check his younger self. He was like, yep, this is how I remember it, and that's how it was. That's exactly how it happened. And the thing that I think is the most impactful in a movie where you don't have a straight line narrative, you have all these different subplots and stories that are unfolding sort of at the same time. He uses this effect of slow motion whenever there is what we would, thanks to Inside Out, modern internet lingo would call it like a core memory. He uses slow motion to show these moments that he remembers impactfully as a kid. The bus driving away from the bus station, his dad throwing the cinder block through the air, certain parts of the stage shows or movies. Whenever he gets the higher marks on his math test and he's walking to his new seat in the class, he uses the slow motion effect to show that, like, I remember all this stuff, but those are the things that stick out. Those are the core memories. Those are the moments that are important. And it helps as a viewer. Those are mile markers for you to go, okay, that's an important thing for me to grab onto. That's going to matter later. Or that's something that's just overall important to the point that the director is trying to make. If you haven't seen the movie and you heard that, you might feel like, oh, that sounds cheesy, or that feels like heavy-handed, but it's not. It's really smooth, and it works really well, and it's a really effective narrative tool in a movie where there's not much of a straight line narrative to follow, which sometimes makes people squirm in their seat a little bit. So I thought that all of that was really well done. It was truly like watching a movie that was created for the screen by Kenneth Branagh as a child. So it's pretty impressive.
It is. Yeah. The childlike memories, I love how you said it, cryogenically frozen, and then just like picks them up and drops them in. Man, it's like in Harry Potter where they pull out the memories and they have like the memory pool, whatever that thing is called.
It's Remembrall or something like that.
That's right. I'm just going to toss this into the film, and that it's so good. Beautifully said.
All right, let's jump over to the other stuff. Let's talk about our notes for director and writer Kenneth Branagh on his film, Belfast.
Well, I don't have a lot because, again, I do want to play a younger version of him someday.
Yeah, you don't want to get in his bad side, right?
Right. Or his stand-in, whatever it might be. I'm there for it. Hopefully, we're about the same height. I have to say that the only thing that was missing for me is that there wasn't that pressure. There wasn't a bigger version, or the pressure cooker feeling of we're gonna be in real danger. Like, we're already in a dangerous situation, but we're gonna get into the thick of it. And by the time you get to that final conflict, when Buddy is about to be killed, essentially, and the cinder block comes and gets tossed over there, it's at that moment you should be like actually scared that Buddy might die. And I guess there's a dichotomy there, because you're like, well, no, he's not going to die because his dad's going to save him. His dad is the superhero, right? But there should have been a little bit more panic, because the timing on that scene was well done. The turn of the corner, the entrapment that you have there in just the tiny town street, and it should have been a little bit more dangerous, I should say. Anyway, I just didn't get the full danger by the time we got to that scene. However, it still played well. I just would have liked a little bit more take my breath away from Mr. Kenneth Branagh in that moment. Very small. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think for me, it's similar. There is definitely that. There is definitely this sense of like the danger is there, but it never really feels like it's mounting, and then it's on your doorstep. It feels like, okay, there's this thing going on. You kind of forget about it. It's mentioned, it's in the background, and then it's like, boom, it's like about to kill us. Like that. There's definitely that. So I agree with you on that one. I would say for me, mine is probably just the overall, and it's a short movie. It's right around like an hour 40 or something like that. It's paced pretty well. So it's not necessarily a momentum thing. There's just like, there's not a sense of, I don't know, urgency in the storytelling, in the sense of like, we have to resolve all of these things in the narrative. Like it's really in this weird space where it's like not totally a portrait pick. It definitely leans more that way to being like, this is a snapshot in my life. And it's not totally a narrative. It's kind of in this like gray area right in between there where like in a portrait pick, you feel like there are plots here, but if they don't get resolved, it's whatever because it's a portrait pick. It doesn't matter. Like we're just trying to figure out what's going on at this time in life and kind of we're just along for the ride. In a narrative, you're like, I need answers to these questions. In this one, you don't really have the urgency to get answers to the questions, but it also feels like, what are all of these subplots for then? Like it doesn't know. I feel like at times it doesn't know exactly what it wants to be. And maybe that's just because, and this is like, again, I want to stress, this is super nitpicky. This isn't like a super critical error because I think the movie plays really well and is engaging and things like that. But it's like, if I paused in the middle of that movie and left it, I wouldn't feel this like nagging at me to go back and finish it because it's just kind of like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Like it's enough to keep you engaged, but not enough to make you want to come back to it, if that makes sense. So it's like, as a child, that's kind of how your memory is. Like you remember some things that are super important and other things that are not. So maybe that is a stylistic choice, but I just got the sense that, I want to feel the need to finish the thing out. And in this one, I didn't. I just felt like, I'll pause it, I'll come back to it, kind of watch it in chunks, etc. And it worked really well for that. And it's still a really engaging movie. It just wasn't, there wasn't a level of urgency to get to a resolution because I wasn't really like yearning for a resolution, if that makes sense. It's kind of weird. It's hard to put my finger on it, but
no, and to speak to the other side of that sword is that, Irish people are not always in a big hurry or in any kind of urgency. I mean, it took them 30 years to solve the Civil War.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh my goodness. No, that's true though. That is true. Yeah. To if you pause it, yeah, you're not like pushing people out of the way, knocking them down to get back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, really, I think there is a dichotomy between a straight line narrative and a portrait pick. Portrait pick is like, this is what life was like in the 60s in Ireland. If that was the movie if this movie was a portrait pick, that's what it would be. If it was a straight line narrative, it would be like, here's the story of how my family left Northern Ireland as a result of the Civil War that was going on and the violence. And this movie really isn't either. It just kind of is a combo. And so, it is hard to figure out emotionally where you're at times in that mix and what you want as the viewer, like what you're hoping for and what you want the film to deliver. What it delivers, you're ultimately satisfied with, Kirk, to your point. Like it is a feel good, even though there are sad pieces to it. There are parts that are like scary and there are parts where there's conflict, but you ultimately leave it going, that was a cool human thing. I don't even want to say story, but it's just a cool human experience that Kenneth Branagh was able to share. So it's interesting. But enough about that. Let's get into final thoughts and scores on Belfast.
The other thing with this movie is that you have a lot of care to it. You have Something as a guess, I'm going to say 90% of the main cast is actually from Belfast. Was either born in Belfast, or was born and raised in Belfast, or spent a significant part of their childhood in Belfast. Pretty cool stuff. We have the soundtrack from Van Morrison, a Belfast native, big musician there that a lot of people know that name, Van Morrison. We have, if you look again at the picture, if you're not watching on the stream, it's the picture of him with his shield and his sword. Of course, Kenneth Branagh played Hamlet in the film Hamlet, where he got to realize his Shakespearean love and become that character. So he's putting all of these little breadcrumbs to his life in this. He picks up a Thor comic for crying out loud, and he's looking through it.
Yeah,
he directed Thor, and Thor was in the comic book store at the time. It's just all over the place. Just a wonderful, well-rounded film that I will buy on March 1st. It comes out on DVD. I'm going to get the 4K resolution to see that beautiful black and white splash against my screen. And it's going to be something I replay very often. And I can't speak enough good things about this film that make you want to cling your family a little bit tighter and appreciate not only the amazing times, the fun times, those harder times, and when you grow a little bit more from it, from a conversation after an argument or an ultimate decision that you don't know if it's right, and then you have to make a decision and move forward. This movie is really powerful, and I'm so happy that it's in our lives. I'm giving this a 9.8 out of 10 kernels.
Whoa, moly. That's a big score. That's a big score.
Big one.
Is it your pick for Best Picture?
Absolutely.
All right. My thoughts. So this movie really has something for everyone. It is so much of a cathartic human exhibition, more so than anything. No matter who you are, where you come from, what your experiences are, I feel like there is something for you in this movie, because there are all different archetypes of people. There are different motivations and stories, and none of these stories is going to be your story, but there will be pieces of each person's story and of each person's feelings that will feel real to you. You may have experienced it personally. You may have known someone who experienced it, and it makes for a really authentic, genuine, heartfelt type of film. It's a cathartic experience. It's a worthwhile experience. You'll laugh, you'll cry, all of the cliches. It really does have something for everyone. And this is exactly the type of movie that the Academy has really loved in recent years. Something that people can just really connect with. And I think that, there are obviously tons of people that have no idea what happened in Northern Ireland in the 1960s. And this film is a totally Irish, white cast that, there will be people who have they won't see themselves on the screen in this movie, but the stories and the human element is very real and very well preserved. And the child element is I think, somewhat universal in nature. Even though these memories won't feel like your memories, you will be able to say, I remember when I was a kid and how I thought about things. And this feels like a kid telling a story. It's really cool. It's artistically sound, really good attention to detail and reason for it. Like sometimes you see something and you're like, why is it in black and white? Is that just because they're like, this is an art house movie? But no, I mean, the cinematography, the color palette, no artificial lighting in this movie. As far as I understand it, they used almost entirely natural lighting because the production budget was so low on it. It's a very artistically sound, but also very real, down to earth, accessible type of movie. And I think there's just, it brings a lot to the table and it has a lot to offer. My score is also in the 9s. I think it has a really good shot at Best Picture. My only pitfall for it is just, it doesn't have the highest of highs or the lowest of lows. It just kind of, it is in the middle of a few things. Like it's in the middle of conflict and family bonding type story. It's in the middle of Portrait Pick versus a straight line narrative. It just kind of is like a strange hybrid movie. And so for that reason, it's a little bit of an interesting watch, but I think it's definitely a worthwhile watch. And for that reason, I'm giving it a 9.2 out of 10. So both of us in the nines for Belfast, and I think it will do very well at the Academy Awards, and definitely has a fair shot at taking home the big one. So we'll see if it gets nominated tomorrow morning. Date of recording on this is Monday, February 7th. So the Oscar noms drop tomorrow as we're recording this. But we'll see. We'll see if it gets nominated, or maybe by the time this podcast releases, we'll have egg on our face because it didn't get a nod. We'll see.
I don't think that'll happen. Don't think that'll happen, Cam. I think it's going to be right at the top of the list. Yeah.
I think it has a very good shot. I think it has a very good shot at getting a nomination. It's one of my locks. It's one of my locks for Best Picture. So
yeah, and then people will say, I've never seen Belfast, never seen that black and white film. Yeah, and they say, oh, how did that film win? They say, oh, check out Popcorn for Breakfast. They talked about it a wee bit ago. You should listen to their podcast and give them lots of money. I think that's how it'll go.
If they talk like that, I would bet they have seen the movie, because any movie called Belfast would really, really make someone with a thick Irish accent like that really want to check it out, I would think.
Yeah, and I'm Dutch. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of ya's going on. I was like, wait, German? Swiss? What's happening? What are we doing here? I'm losing it. But that's Belfast. That's the, I wouldn't call it the Best Picture frontrunner, but I think it's one of the films that people consider, myself included. Maybe people don't, but I feel like, and you feel like, it's one that's going to be nominated. I felt like that right after I watched it. I was like, this is a lock for a nomination, right up there with The Power of the Dog, Dune, West Side Story. I think those are the ones that are really like locked in. But we'll see tomorrow if we are correct, and we'll see in April, March, if it wins the big one. So
March.
A
full month later than what it was for 92 years.
Yeah, that's right. We shall see. It'll be very interesting. It's that time of year. It's Oscar season. We're going to try to get to all of them for you here on the podcast. All the Best Picture noms. We'll try to review as many as we possibly can. But until our next review, we'll leave you by thanking our executive producer, Ryan Spriggs, as well as his band Rhetoric. You're hearing their music right now. We will see you next week.
Talk to you then.